What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Wing and Tail Outdoors. Before we get started today, I do want to apologize for taking so long to post between episodes here. As you know, I am a teacher and the school year started about 3 weeks ago, and I've been just a little bit busier than I had expected. Now we're kind of getting into the swing of things. Things are starting to settle down, so I'm hoping to get back on track and be more regular with these episodes moving forward. On today's episode, we're finally going to dive into our long-term plan. Ideally, we're looking for this to be done somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years. It could get done a little sooner. It could take a little bit longer. It all depends on what time we have and how well we use the time that we have. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So the way that I want to do this today is going to be very similar to the last video I had. I'm going to be working on my iPad and we're going to talk about the different things that are going on it. And to start, I just simply want to show you the overall image or the overall picture of what our property is going to look like down the road. And then we can jump into the different aspects of the video as we go. So first, I want to bring your attention to the key that's down here on the bottom left of the photo. And this is kind of going to help you make sense of what the photo has. I'm not going to read through everything there, but just know that everything that's done with a color is labeled, and that color stays with that label throughout the entire photo. So overall, it looks a little crazy and a little hectic, but we're going to have some trail systems put into our property. We're going to have some travel corridors thrown in there, some watering holes, some bedding areas, some food plots, and we're going to try to do this in a way where it's synergistic, where all these different things can work together and offer us the best chance at harvesting a mature whitetail deer year after year after year. Since access is probably the most important aspect of a hunt, that's where I'm going to start with this today. As you can see, we have a lot of red lines going through here, and if you look down at the key, the red lines are our trail system. And I'm not going to go through the intricate pattern of what it is here or whatnot, but essentially what we're trying to do is I want to be able to go all the way around the outside of our property without ever having to walk through it if I don't want to. If the wind is coming from the northwest, I'm able to wrap around the southeast side of our property. If the wind is coming out of the southeast, then I could cut through the northeast end of our property and go around that way. But just by having a perimeter trail system, it is drastically going to help us access our property in a much smarter way. And then if you look through the picture, there are red lines kind of going through the property. Some of them go across. And that's just to give us the opportunity to access all of our stands by putting the least boots on the ground or for the shortest amount of time, and also to get there in the least intrusive manner. The next thing we see here are all these gray lines. And let's start over here by the still plot. Essentially, these gray lines are nothing more than hinged travel corridors that we are going to cut into these woods ourselves. Now, what we're going to have done on our property, and pretty much what makes this all possible, is we're going to have a timber harvest done. And in the process of doing that timber harvest, the foresters are going to, or the loggers are going to cut the trails for their logging project in the areas or the rough areas where we want our trail system. So that way we're kind of killing two birds with one stone. Then what I've asked them to do is to leave about a 5-foot wide stretch of hingeable trees left alone, uncut, pretty much where all of these gray trails in this picture are. And the reason I asked them to do that is because if we have a 5-foot wide swath of trees, I'm able to hinge the inner 1 foot, basically, like that middle 1 foot, 12 to 15 inches. What I want to do is cut that bare down to the ground and give the deer a nice clear place to run or to walk or travel or whatever. Then I want to have trees left over that I can hinge one to the left, walk a little further, hinge one to the right, walk a little further, hinge one to the left, walk a little further, hinge one to the right, so on and so forth. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the edges of those trails or those travel corridors to get super thick and grow back, both between the hinge cuts and the regeneration that's going to occur. And by hinging those trees perpendicular to the travel corridor rather than parallel, it gives the deer that comfort, that security of knowing that, yeah, they're protected in this travel corridor. But if they need to jump out and escape, they can, because those trees are not blocking their exit or entrance into these travel corridors. Moving on, and probably the biggest part of this that everyone is familiar with, are the food plots. Except we're going to do something a little bit different on our property, and I'm kind of going to blend some different techniques into doing these food plots. So firstly, all the food plots are outlined in yellow and they're titled. So we have the Still plot, we have the Plateau, the Barbershop, Chestnut Ridge, A's plot, which is named after my niece and my goddaughter, the Destination plot, and the Power line. Some of these which we've talked about before. Now the Destination encapsulates both the orchard and both cabin fields that we have running right now. And this turns into about a 6-acre Destination plot. The reason we put it where it is it's probably the easiest place to get it in, and it's the one place where we have the most area already cleared. So if we're going to clear 6 acres or so for a food plot, we might as well put it somewhere where the work's already started. But at the same time, it kind of feeds into what I wanted to do. And if you notice, we have food all the way on one side of the property, beds all the way on the other, with some micro plots kind of in the middle, where deer, if they follow the plan that we're writing, which obviously rarely ever happens, but if we do things correctly, what I'm looking for is for them to have to travel through our property to go from bedding to food, food to bedding. And if everyone around them is pressuring them and we're leaving them alone, I'm hoping that our property is the place where the deer like to go to feel calm and safe and left alone during the hunting season, during hunting hours. So anyway, if we dive into one of these food plots, I'm going to go to A's plot for now. There's kind of a little bit going on. If you look at the key, the yellow is screening, the brown are trees, the purple are treetops. So I want to talk about why I have this designed the way I do. So we know that on our property, the wind typically blows out of the northeast. Okay, so it's coming from the eraser up here in the top left corner down through the plots. So our projected stand location on here would be on the southeast side here. So when the wind is coming down, we are not alerting the deer that are in that food plot. We could also put one on the right side here, and that would serve the same purpose. And we have another one set up here on the top side for a different wind direction if things just aren't going the way they typically do. Now inside of this plot, we've created layers and dynamics within the food plot. So first off, if you notice, this is somewhat of a figure 8 or a hourglass shape, and that is to force the deer to walk through the middle of our food plot. And if they do that and we're sitting here, we're going to be able to shoot most areas that those deer have to walk through. Along with that figure 8 and just the shape of it, we're going to have switchgrass or giant miscanthus. We haven't really decided how we want to do that yet, but we're going to be planting that as both a screen on the perimeter of our property and around these purple dots here that I'm going to talk about in a second. And those screens are to help those deer feel comfortable when they're in the food plot, but also to not allow them to see into the food plot as they're walking by. As we all know, come rut time, bucks love to cruise past food plots and scent check for does. And if there's a screen around it, they have to enter it to see what's in there. They can't just walk by 50, 60 yards away and take a look. And then what these purple dots are here are simply just strategically placed treetops that are going to be placed for us when that harvest is done. We understand that these treetops are not a permanent solution, but they're definitely something to be able to get us going and to build our food plot. And then when the time comes for us to have to replace those obstructions, if you will, we'll be able to put something else in there. But for the time being, it's a way to jumpstart us and get us going in the right direction. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, there may be more, there may be less, who knows. But essentially what I want to do is I want to put fruit trees in every food plot. Now, whether that be a fruit tree or a mast producing tree, whatever the case is, we want some kind of mast in all of our fields. Some of them are going to have apples, some of them are going to have pears, some of them are going to have chestnuts, some of them are going to have a blend. Persimmons also, if I didn't mention that. So in every plot, I want to have some kind of combination of screening, obstruction, obviously forage, food plot forage, but also some kind of mass producing tree. So that way every plot has something each deer could potentially want to eat. And then going back to those travel corridors, if you notice, those travel corridors are going from plot to plot to plot to plot to plot, right? So the travel corridors are designed in a way to get the deer from point A to point B, both what they want to do and what we want them to do. So that way we don't always have to be sitting on the food plots. We can sit in between them and hunt them on their travel corridors rather than always jumping those deer on the food plots and making them educated to what it is that we're doing. To go along with those food plots, you can see there are these blue dots all throughout the property. We got one in the middle, one far left, one middle bottom, and then a bunch over here on the right side of the property. And those are nothing more than water holes. Granted, water is not a limiting factor anywhere in our area. We have lakes, we have runoff, we have natural springs. I mean, there's literally water everywhere. However, if we can get watering holes, say 30 yards off of these food plots that we're hunting, the deer are going to go to the closest source of water. So why force the deer to walk 100, 200, 300 yards to a lake or a spring or whatever the case may be, when we can simply place a watering hole right next to our food plots and give us, again, just another layer of something that the deer want to make our food plots more attractive to these deer throughout the entire hunting season. Now, lastly, we have these pink squares, which are essentially just our beds. Okay. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we have all of our beds essentially on the left half of our property when looking at it in this direction. Yeah, we have some food plots, and this plateau plot, in my opinion, is going to be super hot being between those beds. But our goal is, again, to have our beds on one side of the property and our food on the other. It seems that these deer do like to come in from the south into our property, like we talked about last in that other video. I think that was episode number 2. But these deer are definitely coming up into our property off of these top ends here. Let me just do it in color. These deer are definitely coming in from the top here, off of our neighboring properties, and coming into our property from here and either walking through or cutting corners. So we're really trying to encourage the deer, give them a reason that once they get here, don't leave. Hang out for a while. Eat some food, get some water, hang out, take a nap, rest up. We want to let them know that we are the best bed and breakfast in the area. So these beds have been placed in areas where we know deer hang out. I mean, this bed here is it's on the south facing slope. So we know that come winter, the deer are going to want to be bedded on that south facing slope. And then we have one up here on the top left side of our property that's on the northern facing slope. And that is where deer are going to go to bed on those warmer days where they don't have to worry about being on the southern side where it's warmed up because there's enough warmth in the air. And then we have this bed here where I know I've seen deer before, and down here on the bottom left, which again, we know these deer are coming through here. So our overall goal that we're trying to accomplish here is, yeah, we want to get beds, we want to get food, we want to get travel corridors. But what we're doing also is we're trying to implement these things based around both what we know the deer do historically. Where do the deer hang out? How do they walk? Where do they go? Let's not try to change it too much. And on the other side, we're also trying to make sure that we fit it inside of what our property is allowing us to do. If you notice, I'm going to put this in just dark green just to show you, and then I can get rid of it. But I mean, along this part of our property, we really don't have much going on. Like, yeah, we have a bedding area, we have a food plot there towards the top, but most of that slope coming off the top of the mountain is just riddled in boulders. And when I say boulders, I mean like kitchen table size boulders or larger. So we really wouldn't be able to do anything with those areas anyway. And instead of trying to force it, we're just trying to fit things into where they go. Now I want to talk about our hunting plan for this year real quick, because I do feel that the hunting plan and the overall plan kind of go hand in hand. What we're looking to do this year is, we don't want to shoot anything that we believe to be less than 3 years old. That's kind of where we're starting. We have a lot of 2-year-old deer or yearlings, bucks specifically, on our property, and we feel that that 3-year-old mark is the next tier to go to. When we see that we have a lot of 3-year-olds on our property, we'll bump that up to 4 years old, so on and so forth. Secondly, we have historically seen very little deer activity end of August through September and into October over the last 2 hunting seasons that we've had this property. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if there's something that they're eating on somebody else's property that's drawing them off, or what the deal is, but we're going to try something new this year and not apply pressure to our property in October. If the deer aren't there, we don't want to be there. Why alert the deer to our presence if they're not there for us to shoot anyway? What's going to happen is we're going to go into the woods, we're going to hunt, we're not going to see anything, and then when those deer do come on our property, whether that's at night or a different day, they're going to smell that we were there, and we're going to alert them to us being there without ever having a chance to sit. And remember, the first sit is always going to be your greatest, best chance of harvesting the buck that you're targeting. So why not let that be the best time to sit? Why go into the woods and just make it harder for ourselves? Now, to make that a little bit easier, I have the benefit of living in New Jersey and our property being in New York. And where I live, within an hour of me in basically any direction, I mean, I have so many opportunities for public land hunting. So what I'm going to do is, now towards the end of September, being that it's the September 25th, I'm going to hunt New Jersey through October and allow that to kind of get the hunting bug out of my system. Now, that's not to say we're not going to hunt our property at all. We're just going to keep an eye out for the absolute best days and allow the data to tell us when we should be hunting, not when we want to. So, for example, if we see on camera that we have a buck coming in regularly day after day, we're probably going to go sit that stand when the wind is right. If we see that there is a big weather front coming through, again, paired with deer being on camera, chances are we're going to go and sit that day. But we're not just going to go sit because it's opening day. We're not just going to sit because it's the weekend. It's the only chance that we have to hunt. We're going to hunt it smart. And by being able to hunt other states and other properties, we're not going to have that feeling like, oh my goodness, it's hunting season, I need to be in the woods. Yeah, I want to be in the woods. I'm just going to go hunt somewhere else. And that way, I'm not applying negative pressure to our property, and I have the opportunity to go out, get some deer on camera, and do my thing. Maybe fill the fridge. So that about wraps it up for us today, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about the long-term goal of our property and what that looks like. We talked about our food plots and some of the food plot designs I have, some of the bedding areas, where they're located and why, trail systems both for ourselves and travel corridors for the deer, and kind of how we're going to go about making those work and why I put them, or why I want to put them where I'm going to put them. On our next episode of Wing and Tail, chances are I'm going to give you an update of what our food plots look like. I have not been on the property since I planted the fall plots, and at this point I'm not sure that I want to until it's time to go hunting. So what I may end up having to do is use some trail camera photos to give you like an update, but we'll see how that goes. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on our next episode of Wing and Tail Outdoors, where success is always just a commitment away. Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.